Right, we're now looking at spotlights that I've downloaded from the 3D warehouse, and they come as there's a couple on this sort of bar system. So I've then added a few more to it and sort of duplicated them. So let's have a look at what we've got. And this is a rendering with a sort of soft shadow light. So I'll take you through this process. So this is a rig. Let's just copy it and move it outside. And then just get out and have a look at what we've got here. So this is been downloaded from the 3D warehouse, okay, and it's a support system with a rail, and then on the rail, if I just double click to edit it, we've got these sort of light elements. So these are all individually orientated, but this component is the same as another one inside, or the copy of them. So just give you a quick update on what happens with components. If I copy that and I double click this to edit and I select this one, let's say, then I'm also selecting that because it's nested within this component and it's the same sort of element from it. To orientate them, the easiest way, because they pivot on this thing, so they don't have to be exactly on there, because you would never notice it when you render it, but unless you got really close, then you have to sort of position it a little bit more easily. It's not so easy to position these things, but if you go into X-ray mode, often you'll find that it's a bit easier. There's a little cross there, so you can pick on that and then you can pop it into the center point of that, and then you should find that it's sort of okay. You can, manipulate them as I turn this one round, then the other one's sort of moving as well. And then once you've got that set, just X-ray mode, find that center point, and then move it into the midpoint of that. So that's a little brief update on that. Now, within this element, if I double click this, I've nested the VRay light. So that means that I can right click on it, on VRay for SketchUp, edit light, and so I get control of all of the lights. Now I can't individually edit them unless I made elements unique, or if I made that cluster unique, maybe I could have different colored lights on that. So it would mean that you'd have to sort of break it down a little bit more, in a little bit more intricate way to get a bit more control, but this is controlling all of the lights at the moment. I've set the intensity to about 400 lumens, so that gives me quite a nice light. I'll really drop it down to maybe 300. For this, the cone angle is standard, so it's set to 1, so that's giving us the normal sort of light throw from it, and then the penumbra is set to 0.2, which is going to soften it quite a bit. If I take that back to 0, and then we'll do a render, and we'll see what happens. The shadow radius is up to 1,000. The shadow radius is up to 100, and the shadow subdivisions are set to 16. There's no barn door on it, and the decay on this one is inverse. There's a linear penumbra fall off. I could change that to smooth cubic. I'm not sure what that does, but let's have a look anyway, because my penumbra angle is sharp, so let's see what the decay is like on that. And then we can say okay to that. Let's flick out these. Because I copied these anyway, I can just delete these and go back to scene 1, and then we've got our lights. So if I click the render, and then we're going to wait for this thing to render out, but we should notice that the edges of the light are pretty sharp, even though they'll all overlap and they'll all pick up some of this stuff and it'll reflect in different directions. We do have some sharp light. One of the things I failed to point out a second ago was that there's an emissive material on the edges of these lamps around here. Okay, so the light settings aren't set to that higher standard. But what I'll do at the end of this is crank everything up and do a render to see, you know, how much difference it makes if we have sort of high quality passes and light bounces and smooth shadows. So the subdivisions will be up to about 32, and I'll set my lighting settings to sort of a high standard. But this is a sort of effect I'm getting. Okay, I can't see any much difference between the bicubic fall off and the linear fall off, but it might have sort of softened it as it gets away from the light source. So I'll stop that at that point. I'll double click on one of these, double click on a light, select the light fitting, the VRay light, edit light, and change the penumbra angle to 0.2. Let's go for 32 subdivisions on that. Everything else I think I'll leave. The shadow radius is okay. I'll say okay. Maybe we can change the light color as well to maybe a sort of a yellowy light. Soften it down a bit. Okay to that. Click out a few times. And then if I go into my interior and interior presets, I'll go for high quality. Click that. Hit the render. And I'll see you back in a bit. Okay, 10 minutes, 44.8 seconds later, this is what we get. Okay, so quite smooth, struggled around this bit. I could even hear my graphics card whining a little bit as it was processing this, but not bad at all. Now, the thing that makes this look a little bit poor from my perspective is that there's just a lack of finishes and all sorts of stuff within this room. There's you might not get anything around this sort of area, but you'd certainly expect to see some sort of dado system around there, window detailing going in and other bits and pieces that would just make it look a huge amount better. Other things to point out when you start cranking everything up is the specular highlights that you can add to materials. That then would increase rendering time much more. So some of the settings that you have, just sort of minimize that for a minute, and let's close that down. Double click, and select light and edit light. I don't know why they just picked up those ones. Does it affect specular? Yeah, so you got the options to affect specular. If you ever see this and you've got specular things, just turn it off unless you want to be there for ages. So those sorts of things are, again, little pointers in the right direction. But that's it for the general sort of lighting. Next that we'll be looking at this type. Now this is an IES light, and if we pop an IES light in, it looks different. And then edit light. Let's just drag this all the way down. A lot of the settings are the same, but there's this option here for an IES light file. Okay, so that's going to give you a very sort of unique sort of flooding from the light. If I just pause this for one more time, and I'll see if I can dig some up so you can see the sorts of patterns that you can get from IES lights. So this is an old tutorial from the early form of VRay, but it just basically goes to the IES sort of light thing, edit light, and then you get a file option. You find an IES file and you load that in, and you've got to change the color of the light, obviously, but this is the sort of thing that it does. So for wall downlighters or for sconces, you get these patterns. It's a much longer throw from this one compared to this one, and this one's again giving you a different light pattern. So that's what IES lights do. Okay, so we'll cover that in the next bit.